I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for May 18th, 2021. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Councillor Demota.
Hi there. I noticed that there's been a considerable change to the format today, and you know, I was kind of, although I do embrace change, and I know that we're doing a trial of moving away from notice of decision and things like that, and I just think that you know, this is a council agenda, and I probably would have been a little bit more prepared receiving this for the weekend if I knew that they were coming in. Although I do embrace change, sometimes I'm not really taken by surprises too much. So I do recall having some discussion about change, but not for the specifics that are out here today. And I'd like to try them out. But on a similar note, you know, I move that we change item number 14 from closed session to read back to in camera, because that's in reflection of our procedural bylaw. There's no definition for closed session there, and just to, you know, stay in formation with that. I'm not meaning to be nitpicky. I'm just, you know, wanting to stay within what our parameters are. So with that being said, changing item 14 to in camera from closed session.
Thank you. While you're at it, I see you, Mr. Given, but perhaps agenda item 8 also can be addressed. But Mr. Given, I will give you an opportunity to respond. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mayor Ireland, and thanks, Councillor Demota. It just goes to show how closely council members read the agenda rather than just the content, the format as well, which I really appreciate. We do, of course, have the procedure bylaw, which sets out the format of the agenda, as well as some of the specifics. I think the change around closed session, item number 14, is related to our discussion that we had around the council code of conduct, and the point that council members brought up that the current term in the MGA is closed session rather than in camera. And so I think that was a proactive attempt by administration to adjust that. But we do need to adjust our procedure bylaw because it does set out the format and the specific terms. So we'll do that. The other one that I wanted to note was number 8, which I thought you might, when you started speaking, you might be bringing up, where it says committee recommendations. In our procedure bylaw, that's called RFDs, but in our weekly meeting, we had a discussion and confirmed that there wouldn't be a situation where administration would bring forward an RFD straight to council without it first going through committee, without you first seeing it. And so, you know, the actual thing that's happening is that anything that comes up under number 8 will be, you know, recommendations from committee. Again, the term RFD is included in our procedure bylaw, and I caught that after the agenda was published. So we'll change it back. And when we go through and look at our procedure bylaw, as I think we're sort of set to do here, given the number of changes in the MGA and other process changes, then we can change those titles to be more in line with current practice. But thanks for noticing those. You'll see something that is more regular and fits the format of the procedure bylaw at our next meeting.
Councillor Demota.
Yeah, just for follow-up, and you know, and forgive me if you know, I'm talking about embracing change and then challenging it, and I might make reference to committee of the whole, and I've always felt that was kind of our dressing room or our prep room prior to addressing things on the agenda. So you know, I think that we should have that discussion at our committee of the whole, and if there are going to be changes or you know, intent to have recommendations for change on our regular agendas, that we should discuss what the specifics of those might be at a committee of the whole. And that's just me, but if that's not the desire of council, it's still worth discussing and having debate over in that format. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
All right, thank you both for that. Thank you, Mr. Given. On the basis of that discussion, I am going to propose that there is a motion from Councillor Demota to amend today's agenda in terms of item 8 to say RFD, and in terms of item 14 to revert to the previous wording of in-camera session. I will suggest, and if Councillor Demota will accept this as an addition to his motion, to delete item 4.1. Mr. Pedesi is not available to give that presentation this morning, so that will come at a later time. Are there any other changes required to be made to today's agenda? Hearing none, I will accept those 3 changes as a motion from Councillor Demota. All in favor of those changes to today's agenda? Councillor Wilson, have you voted? Are you opposed? I will call for opposed. Are there any opposed? You are opposed. Thank you. That motion is carried. May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda as amended? Those opposed? There is 1 opposed. That is carried. The minutes of the regular meeting of May 4th have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Hearing none, might I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes as circulated? Thank you, Councillor McGrath. All in favor? Are there any opposed? There are none opposed. That is carried. My apologies, I just have to look whether I do see someone in the waiting room, and I would ask Ms. Bird if she's able to add one more face to our screen, if that's possible. And there it is. Thank you. So agenda item 4.2 is a long service award, and along with all of the more and most severe outcomes of the continuing pandemic, we've suffered individually and collectively the loss of opportunities to celebrate important milestones. Ordinarily, we take time during the community Christmas party to recognize and appreciate long service awards. That possibility was sadly denied to us in 2020, with the result that at least one very deserving staff member did not receive the public recognition she richly deserves. These many months later, we have today an opportunity to attempt to make amends for that. So this particular forum perhaps lacks some of the atmosphere, the energy, the pomp and ceremony, and certainly the fancy dress of a public presentation at the community Christmas party and in the presence of the very public she serves. But it does not lack for the really genuine expression of gratitude for long service to the community. And so, as I would at the community Christmas party, I will call upon the relevant director, in this case, Mrs. McNabb, to present a long service award to a deserving employee of the municipality. Mrs. McNabb.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I just wanted to highlight the gift that Joanne has chosen for her service, and she has done or commissioned a painting done by Emma Pavely, and it's an ocean scene painting. She has not yet received it, but it is in the works, and hopefully she'll have it in her house proudly displayed in a very short period of time. So Joanne began her career as a clerk with the Culture and Recreation Department in 2000. She was working on a part-time basis at the Activity Center, and in 2011, she moved into a part-time senior clerk position. In 2012, she took a temporary transfer into the aquatic administration position. And in 2013, Joanne moved into the full-time fitness and aquatic administration position. She was replacing Natasha Melanchak, who moved into the aquatic fitness center manager role. So she's started at the aquatic center when the aquatic center was just an aquatic center, and then was able to move into the aquatic admin position when we turned it into a fitness and aquatic center. So that was exciting that she was able to see those changes through her career. While Joanne has enjoyed working with the public and nurturing and mothering the young fitness aquatic center staff, her true passion is without a doubt working with the seniors and especially the ladies in Aquafit. This past year, Joanne wanted to increase her knowledge and skill, not only for herself, but for her senior Aquafit class by achieving yoga instructor status. Joanne has been a driving force towards the continuing success of the annual Halloween Splash, which started back in 1996. What she's done is she collects the donation, organizes the activity stations, and all of the volunteers. So that is a huge task. Joanne has also shown herself willing to take on new challenges, most recently the health and safety manual rewrite. I am so appreciative that she was willing to step out of her comfort zone and challenge herself with completing such a daunting task. The binder is 2 6-inch binders of material that she was required to go through and adjust and reformat. So it's a huge project. Please join me in celebrating the many contributions that Joanne has made to the Fitness and Aquatic Center and the staff around her over the past 20 years of service. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Joanne. There she is. In normal times, Joanne would now be standing, perhaps blushing and a bit embarrassed in front of a large audience of her admirers at the multi-purpose hall to receive that gift that Yvonne mentioned. And I understand that the gift, as Yvonne indicated, is a water scene that's appropriate and commissioned by a former employee of the Aquatic Center, again, so relevant and appropriate. So congratulations, Joanne, so well-deserved. Thank you for all you've done for staff, but also all that you have done for the community. It's much appreciated, far beyond council and staff. Your contributions are noted and greatly appreciated. And absolutely no pressure, Joanne, but just pretend you're standing on that stage at the multi-purpose hall. I would invite you to say something if you wish. You don't have to, but the floor is yours should you wish to say anything.
This is not what I was expecting. I thought I was auditing a council meeting. So I just love my job. I love the community and I love the engagement I get. So it's not really coming to work when I come here, it's coming to be with my people. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Joanne. Again, our great appreciation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again, Mrs. McNabb, for that wonderful presentation. Councillor Butler.
Thanks very much. In normal times, there would be no opportunity for anyone to add anything to the very complete accolades that that you, your worship, and Mrs. McNabb have provided, but we're not in normal times. So I did want to mention one thing. I certainly in no way can suggest I speak for the seniors community, but I have connections and insights there. And Yvonne mentioned something. which I think is, you know, worthy of a little bit of underlining. And this is, to be honest, this comes from my mother and her friends who participate in the Seniors Aquafit. And Yvonne mentioned the energy and attention Joanne puts into that program and others like it. And, you know, I think it's something that isn't probably specifically written into your job description, but I would like Joanne to know in these times when we can't be doing that kind of thing, just how much that's valued. I hear it all the time from some of those folks, just how much they appreciate those opportunities. And Joanne, the way you go about it, the way you manage the program, the way you keep in touch with them, it's a really important part of the week for those folks. And as I said, I don't think anybody told you you needed to do that. I think you just saw that something could be done there. So congratulations and my thanks on behalf of all those folks that value that program so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Butler, for those very appropriate and kind words. All right, thank you again, Joanne in particular. We can move, I think, to agenda item 5, business arising. Is there any business arising from previous minutes? Right, if there is not, we can move to agenda item 6, department reports. And again, I will turn to Mrs. McNabb, Culture and Recreation Department report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just have a few things to add and turn off my phone. With regards to the swimming pool shutdown. So because budgets were approved recently and because of the announcements that occurred with Alberta Health Services, we're taking that opportunity to recoat the pool. That was a capital project that was just approved. So this is a perfect opportunity to do that so that we don't have to do another shutdown once we are able to open, that we are hoping that that will all be taken care of and be completed by that. We also have some warranty work on some leaky water lines that were repaired back in December, and those are not quite functioning the way they should be. So we've got the contractors coming back for that, although they might not be able to make the exact timelines, which might extend it a little bit, but hopefully they're able to get to us within the next 2 weeks. I also wanted to highlight on here that because of the Alberta Health Services changes and reductions, we have deployed the staff that we have right now into shutdown mode at the Aquatic Center, which is great. They're able to take care of the items that still had not been completed and that need servicing. And then we've also deployed some of the front desk staff into our health and safety audit, which is coming up. So that's been an extreme help, and also helping administration, Natasha at the administration office. So it's been helpful in that sense, and we've been able to utilize the staff that we have right now on the payroll. The one thing to note that if we do open up with Alberta Health Services, and when we're able to open up, that it's going to be challenging times. Several of our staff have already taken on jobs elsewhere. And so recruiting the staff back is going to be a bit of a challenge. We don't know what it's going to look like when we are able to open and how many staff we are actually going to have left to pull from. So we may be doing some posting and things might not open up as easily as we hope. And I just want the public to know to please be patient with us. We're doing the best that we can when we reopen, and we'll get things open, but it might take us a little bit longer to get to the regular hours that we're used to. We also have the tennis courts and pickleball courts that are open. You can book those online. So those are things that you can book through the website and enroll and pick a time slot and be able to book that online. So if you have any questions on the rest of my report, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you for that report, Mrs. McNabb. Questions from councillors? Councillor Wilson.
Mrs. McNabb, thank you for that. I just would like to add on your final point there about tennis and pickleball. Well, thank you for opening those up. Is there an opportunity to rent rackets at all, or does everybody have to have rackets to be able to use?
Yeah, right now there is no opportunity to rent rackets. So they would have to have their own at this particular point. It is challenging because we're trying to follow the rules to the letter of, you know, how to get equipment and out there, or to get it sanitized in between. So Alberta Health Services recommended that everybody just bring their own equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Demota.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mrs. McNabb. I appreciate the detailed report in front of us today. In that report, there's a reference to the failed sprinkler head in what is called the gymnastics area of the activity center. I just wanted to, you know, clarify for everybody that that wasn't a fault of the municipalities, and it does say that it is 45 years old. But just if Mrs. McNabb can follow up on that, they do have 50. From what I learned, they do have a 50-year life expectancy. So there are many of them that are probably due, and that was just a failure before it needed to be changed. Is that correct, Mrs. McNabb?
That is correct. So I have the sprinkler head on my desk, actually, for the insurance company. And when we looked at the dates, it is 45 years old. So when we worked with the sprinkler company, and they went back in their recommendations for sprinkler heads, and it indicates that sprinkler heads should be changed out every 50 years at least. And these ones are then getting very close to being due. So it's something, it'll be a big project, but it's something that's going to need to take place. And that would be in the gymnastics area and the curling rink.
Thank you. Mr. Given?
Just to supplement that, you know, I think the lesson here is about asset management and about proactive asset management. In spite of the fact that some assets, you know, they have a predicted lifespan, proactive investigation of them on a regular basis, as well as proactive replacement rather than waiting until, you know, an expiry date, because this kind of equipment doesn't work exactly like that. Neither do pipes in the ground. When they choose to fail, they fail. And we see that they have significant consequence when they choose to fail, in spite of what the manufacturer's guidance might be for an estimated lifespan. And so I think that that's where, we can all use this as a little bit of a object lesson of needing to invest regularly in asset management, in proactive maintenance and investigation, and that, you know, there is a financial consequence to not doing that on a regular basis.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Mrs. McNabb, I think I see your hand up. Councillor Demota, did you want to go back to this? Because I see Councillor McGrath is also waiting. Mrs. McNabb, go ahead.
I just wanted to highlight, with this particular flood, we've had numerous floods at the activity center over the years that I've worked here. And most of them are usually due to a burst pipe or sprinkler head. And this particular incident, I really, really cannot thank the staff enough, because they all got together. We were all out the muster point because we had to evacuate the building because the fire alarm went off. Everybody from the muster point came in. They grabbed wet dry vacs from every single area that we possibly could have them. I believe we had probably 6 wet dry vacs going. And that mess was cleaned up in a very, very short period of time, which really limited the damage that occurred. The insurance company that came to investigate it were thrilled to death with how quickly we responded and how little damage was actually occurred during that time period.
Thank you, Mrs. McNabb, for relaying that information. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and through you to Mrs. McNabb. I'd just like to share some gratitude to both you and, of course, your entire team that stands behind you. You have had so many starts and stops this year. You have been thrown so much adversity and have dealt with so much extra challenges on top of the regular challenges that exist. Thank you for all you have done for our residents in our community to be able to recreate whenever and however possible. My family was fortunate to be able to play those few weeks of hockey on the ice, and it was so beneficial to our community and my family's wellness, and it was amazing to have that short opportunity. And also from your report, was impressed with the reduction in flooding necessary for our new slab. So from 110 floods to 50 floods is remarkable. So congratulations to you and your team, and much gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. In the absence, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Demota.
Oh, I was just wondering, I know that we started on a GIS mapping project years ago, and I know that has to do more with our in-ground stuff, but it does, you know, record replacement and expiry dates, I guess, of or best before dates of certain in-ground materials, including fire hydrants and things like that. Do things like sprinkler replacements and things like that going forward have a place where that information gets entered on when they need to be replaced, and will we have little warning signs in the future of, you know, the new things that we find?
Go ahead, Mr. McGibbon.
Mr. McGibbon, I'm a leading point scorer in the league right now. I'm running up my totals. Thanks very much, Your Worship. Councillor Demota, administration, so a slight difference between the GIS system, which is basically graphical mapping of physical assets, and an asset management system, which is sort of the contextual information about the condition of the assets, the time they were installed, and all that sort of stuff. They absolutely go hand in hand. And administration is actually right in the middle of evaluating a software system to support our asset management program that would track the kind of details that you're talking about. This becomes particularly relevant with the change in operator at the wastewater treatment plant. Best practice from just about all the operators was to have an asset management system. Administration wants to ensure that we are in control of the data that is going to be developed around the wastewater treatment plant, and then be able to extend that across the rest of the organization to capture exactly what you're talking about. We have made provision for this in the 2021 budget that was approved by council. And so we expect to be moving forward with an implementation of an asset management software over the course of the next number of months. Then it will be the big project of starting to populate that, particularly where we have older facilities where when was that valve installed? Gosh, I don't know, because the piece of paper that somebody might have recorded it on at some point is lost to time. So it will be a significant project, but administration is taking the right steps to ensure that we have the technology in place that will allow us to capture that data and assist in our asset management on an ongoing basis, just like you identified.
Thank you for contextualizing my layperson terminology. I appreciate that. So that lays it out nicely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I want to just return briefly to a comment made by Councillor McGrath, and that is with respect to the reduction in the number of floods that are required because of the new arena slab. That's a really critical component of asset management as well. And it ties in, it seems to me, very well with the direction that council gave a week or so ago to administration to pursue the joint position with Hinton with respect to managing utilities. And so I hope that within administration currently, we can combine current savings into some sort of form that can be passed on to that temporary position, so that in the long term, our residents will understand significant changes that have been made over time, and not as a consequence of the temporary position, but as a result of the efforts of our community to date. I just think it's important to record how utility consumption and therefore greenhouse gases are reduced. And in turn, our community gets a more playable surface. Our staff time is reduced. There are simply multiple benefits, and I'm hoping that there is a way to record those, appreciating that everybody is already at full capacity. But I really do thank you for bringing that point forward in your report, Mrs. McNabb, and I appreciate the comments of Councillor McGrath in that regard. If there is nothing else with respect to Mrs. McNabb's report, I thank you for that. And I'm sorry, Councillor Butler.
Apologies for jumping in at the last moment, but it picks up a little bit on the comments you were just making, Mr. Mayor, which is thanks for your report, Mrs. McNabb. I just wondered if it's an appropriate time to ask what is the status of the ice plant replacement project? And by all means, if we don't have an answer today, I think it might be timely that if we could have just a little quick update in the next couple of meetings as to where that project stands. Because, and I mentioned this only because we've been talking about the slab and a number of floodings, and that is going to bring to mind of residents who are wondering, so where do we stand on that project? So I don't know if you know the answer or if we could just get some kind of a update in the next couple of meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. I can speak to that a little bit, not a lot. What we do know is that right now we are working with a contractor that will be taking the project back out to tender. And that is supposed to occur shortly. So I believe we are getting extremely close to getting that out to tender, and we should be able to start moving forward. Once we do that, it shouldn't take very long, because a lot of the ideas that came forward in the last go around are still very pertinent. Things haven't changed. So from that perspective, we've got a lot of the information already gathered, so it shouldn't take too long to be able to go forward once we go to tender.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Demota.
Well, you know, at this point, I'm glad that Councillor Butler brought that up, because it's been off the radar for a while. But just to, again, to commend the foresight that Mrs. McNabb, Mr. Greathead, and Mr. Bridge had in tying in the old with the new and taking advantage of, you know, the pandemic closure and having the foresight to see that getting the boards and the new ice surface in prior to having that refrigeration unit built in to the system. And you know, this might be some time away, but because of that, we do have an operating ice surface, and that will benefit the community going forward. So I much appreciated that. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for those questions and that response, Mrs. McNabb. I'm thinking that I now might thank you a final time, Mrs. McNabb, and turn to agenda item 7. which I will do. Agenda item 7 being bylaws. 7.1 is bylaw summary for information, and agenda item 7.2, code of conduct for elected officials bylaw, which is before us for first reading, has been here a couple of times at least, so I'm not sure that it needs any further introduction. I will leave that to Mr. Given and staff if necessary, but otherwise the document is here for first reading, and I presume that we have a motion in that regard, if there is any councillor prepared to make that motion at this time. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I move that council read for the first time bylaw number 235, Code of Conduct for Elected Officials bylaw, being a bylaw for the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to establish a code of conduct for members of council.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McGrath. If you wish to speak to the bylaw, having made the motion, you're welcome to do that. It more or less speaks for itself, but go ahead if you wish.
I have nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you. Any debate? All right, Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I want to take the opportunity to thank administration and the individuals within administration who have put a lot of work into this, starting with reminding council that it in fact needed to be done. The document is not perfect and will never be perfect. It's in the nature of a document like this that we learn and we go and we experience the outcomes of it. And what I think is important to note here is that while it's not, I think, mentioned specifically in the document, the understanding that it would be reviewed by each incoming council, which is a really important step. This council took the step of reading and understanding and talking about the previous policy, but not informally reviewing it. And it seems to me we've had quite a lot of conversation about policy review. This is really policy, while the MGA requires us to place that policy within a bylaw. And it underlines the importance of reviewing our policies on a regular basis, and this one will be reviewed, as I understand it, by each incoming council, which is a pretty critical step, I think. So I just wanted to make that point, and again, thank administration.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Demota.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if this gives us the opportunity to bring up our procedural bylaw at the next committee of the whole, just because now, if this goes into third reading, we have a code of conduct area in the procedure bylaw, and they might be in conflict, and that might give us the opportunity to address the in-camera issue and make some adjustments there so that these two things can move forward hand in hand. And I don't know if that was the intention, and if we discussed that previously, please forgive me. I wanted to make sure that, you know, we're in line with both things.
Mr. Given.
Thanks, Your Worship. To Councillor Demota's point about the Code of Conduct bylaw, the structure of the bylaw that's in front of you with respect to Code of Conduct bylaw 235 is such that it actually contains a provision to repeal the schedule of the procedure bylaw. So when, should council choose to give this bylaw a third reading at some point, it will automatically repeal the pre-existing council code of conduct that was buried in the procedure bylaw. So we wouldn't need to address the procedure bylaw because passing this actually makes that change. I think, as we identified at the start of the meeting, there's probably good reason to review the procedure bylaw generally to make sure that it fits with current practice and the way that council would like to go. But there's not passing this bylaw doesn't make that an automatic thing that has to happen. Council can choose when they wish to review the procedure bylaw.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Before I call the question, I'll just add my thanks, as has been done by Councillor Butler in particular, but Councillor McGrath and Councillor Demota as well. And in particular, ensuring that we are compliant. Conduct is very much an ethical standard in any event, not necessarily simply a legal standard. So I wasn't concerned at all, but it is important that we are on side with the legislation and that we have a bylaw in conformity with the existing provincial legislation. And administration has been very thorough in that regard. And I point in particular to the comments you just made, Mr. Given, relating to Article 1.2 of the proposed new bylaw. It received no attention from council throughout our long discussions, but it was strategically placed up front, and a credit to administration. And I would probably be wise to single out Ms. Nadon in particular for ensuring that that clause was included, so that we didn't run into the potential conflict that Councillor Demota has landed upon. So again, I join in thanks to administration for keeping us compliant with legislation and out of any further difficulty. I thank you all for that. If there is no further debate on the motion, I will call the question. All in favor of first reading? There are none opposed. That is carried. And is it safe to assume, Mr. Given, that this matter will be back for second reading on the next occasion, the next council meeting?
Yes, Your Worship, I believe so. We'll forward this through as per the regular process for bylaw approval in the municipality. I believe we would circulate this to Parks. I wouldn't imagine that they would have a comment, other than to say congratulations to council for establishing such a great code of conduct bylaw, but I don't see that it has an impact on Parks operations, and I would expect that we should be able to see it back at the next regular council meeting.
Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 7.3, the taxation rate bylaw 2021. And for that, Mr. Given, I will turn to you to lead us through that discussion.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll be actually quite brief. I know that council has seen a number of tax levy bylaws in past years. This one is the same format that you are used to. There is one note that is highlighted in green, just so that it's there for council to be able to understand how it's reflected with respect to the COVID relief rebate. That rebate is reflected as revenues that are coming in. And so if council had any question about how that was going to be activated, you can see that it is included as revenue in the 2021 year at $1 million. And that's included in that $14,543,019 of revenue from all sources other than taxation. So just wanted to highlight that section because that's about the only thing that would be different from previous bylaws that you've seen, and it's here for council's consideration for first and second reading. I would note that we are pushing up against the timelines that were required to establish a bylaw and to file tax notices with property owners, and would just make that point about where we are in the year. I think this is somewhat similar to where council ended up last year, but it does not leave a significant amount of time for substantive change to the content of the bylaw in terms of budget. This is really a function of the budget has been decided, and this is the tool that is needed to implement that budget to gather the revenue required. With that, Your Worship, it's there for council's consideration and any motions.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Demota.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And, please excuse me if I am coming across as being disputative today. It's not my intention, but, I have prepared a motion to refer the first and second reading for today to committee of the whole. And I know that we're pressed up for time, but again, making reference back to council having a staging time for motions coming forward. And the reason behind this, and maybe I should just make the motion first, but I do have some reasons. And, you know, I just going forward, I believe this needs a little bit more work. If we go into the first whereas, in the bylaw, it says at this meeting of April 7th, 2020. So was that done a year ago? Because I don't remember having a meeting on this April 7th, and I just wanted to know what date that was actually on, because I know that we didn't pass the first budget got defeated, and then it wasn't till 2 weeks later. So we need to define what we're referring to there. And then in the second whereas, the total budget number has changed again, and from what I can receive, from what I understand is received, and I'm not sure if that includes the $395,000 that has been observed recently, and we haven't decided on where that's going yet either. But on that note, we also don't have you know, a consolidated format for the budget. So this does refer to the operating budget of the municipality that was decided on, but we still haven't seen anything from administration which clarifies what exactly we're making decisions on and providing clarity for the community. We, again, making reference to what we received in last November, we don't have those revised numbers yet. So having said that, I think we need to have a little bit more work done there. And then the third whereas refers to the requisition for policing. And I'm thinking we might have an opportunity there with the tax notices and also in the breakdown of the requisitions as far as the tax rates go, to have an opportunity to see where people's taxes are going to and how they're being addressed, because this isn't a service that the municipality is providing. So I think that, you know, people should understand that this isn't something that's coming out of like the municipal operating budget, even though we are getting money from the community to support this service in the community. And then lastly, there's some things in the definitions that refer to some of the columns in the tax rates. And there are some things that may be missing in the rows there. And maybe we don't need a definition for evergreens or education or municipal, but we do have some abbreviations in there like M&E, PILT and DIP that might need definitions for, right? So I think there's a little bit of work to do. And then I think that going from first to second readings today might be a little bit quick if we need to go through all those things. So I'm ready to make a motion if anybody else has anything to address on that today.
Mr. Given?
Just as a matter of process, Your Worship, my suggestion would be that council make a motion for first reading to get the bylaw under consideration. And then if there are changes that are needed, council could give direction to administration on those changes so that we could refresh the bylaw when it comes back for second and third reading. And so if there are specific, that way it is actually under consideration and we still maintain the gap between first and final reading. So if, you know, if council wanted to address some of those things, and appreciate the typo in terms of 2021 versus 2020, we absolutely catch that. Would note that the whereases are essentially sort of setting up the context of the bylaw, and they're not the content of the bylaw per se. But we can absolutely catch those, and some of the definitions that you noted, they wouldn't be easily understandable by the casual reader. I'm not sure how many casual readers read our actual taxation bylaw. They're more interested in what are my taxes going to be and what services our levels are going to be. But you know, we can absolutely address those to make it more transparent. My process suggestion would be that council should consider first reading, and then we can identify these changes and make those changes when it returns for consideration of second and third reading.
Thank you, Mr. Kivett. Councillor Butler?
Thank you very much. I have three questions, I think, or areas of concern. The first is looking at the Evergreens requisition. I would like to understand what is listed under prior year over under. I don't really know what that means. So that amount of $3,675, could you clarify what that amount is for me?
Thanks, Councillor Butler. I'll speak to it generally, Councillor Butler, what over and under requisitions are, and maybe Ms. Melnichuk can just speak to why that specifically happened with Evergreens. But generally, there are times where a requisition amount is not known when administration develops the bylaw. I think Evergreens is quite conscientious about sending us through the information, but certainly with the education, the school foundation, the reason that you see an over-under levy is because the province sometimes will announce those too late for municipalities to be able to incorporate them. And so administration's in a position where they have to make an estimation. Okay. And that's what we would have done with respect to the Alberta School Board Foundation requisition. On the Evergreens, I think Ms. Melnichuk can maybe speak to the specifics of why the Evergreen amount was needed.
I'll just jump in and say that I understand that's fine. I don't need more explanation. I wondered if it was meant to represent a year-over-year change, and I wondered why we would. But if I can understand, there would be reasons why a requisition might not be to the penny in 1 year, and we would make up for it another year. So I don't want to belabor it. I asked and answered. Thank you. However, the Evergreens requisition, the operating and capital amounts are incorrectly stated. They are reversed. It doesn't change the math, but the larger 400,000 requisition is the operating requisition, and is the capital requisition. My next question is around the green highlighted section of $1 million for the COVID relief rebate. And I certainly understand the rebate, but what I want to clarify is the mill rates that are listed, are the mill rates applied before the $1 million rebate? Is that correct? Or do the mill rates indicated factor in that $1 million rebate?
Thanks, Your Worship, to Councillor Butler's question. And again, to be clear, if Ms. Melnichuk wanted to correct me, she could. My understanding is that the $1 million is reflected as revenue outside of taxes, and that would be factored in before the mill rates are calculated. So the $1 million is being pulled in as revenue, which means that the mill rates are lower than they would otherwise have to be if we didn't have that additional $1 million of revenue brought in.
So the mill, if we did not have, I just want to be really clear. If we did not have that line in green and did not apply that $1 million as revenue, then the mill rate that residents would see on their tax invoice would be higher than what it is going to be. And the reason I asked is I thought at one point we would see a higher mill rate and then see a credit on those invoices.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Butler. So you're thinking of it exactly correctly. If we didn't recognize the $1 million, we would only have $13,543,019 in revenue from all sources other than taxation, and we would need to increase the amount of revenue from taxation, which would increase our higher rate. I think that there are some. Recognizing that the idea of a tax credit is a bit unique, has been used by other municipalities, to be sure, over the last year or so, but is a bit unique. It is going to take some adjustments to our typical tax notice software and approach, but we wanted to ensure that we were highlighting it clearly for council and the community by breaking out that additional revenue here, and we will do the same and show residents what the impact is on their tax bills as well.
All right, good. Thank you. And then I had a third point, if I may.
You may, yes.
Mayor, I'm now looking at the taxation rates, which are the mill rates under item 3. And regrettably, I have raised this point every single year that I've sat on council since 2017. Municipal Government Act specifies that the maximum ratio between non-residential and residential tax rates is 5. And our tax ratio split is in this document 5.1 to 5. I know that we have considered ourselves to be, I can't remember the terminology right now, but a non-conforming municipality. The intent of the MGA, as revised back in 2016, is clear that the maximum ratio split should be 5-1, and we're beyond that. I've mentioned this every year, and I will acknowledge that it has never been directed by council to change that, but it is directed by the provincial government to change that. And I am not happy to see that yet again, here it is before us at a 5.1 to 1 ratio. And I would like to understand why we have not come into compliance with the Municipal Government Act. And I'll go so far as to saying that I can't support reading and won't support reading of this bylaw with that excessive tax ratio in place. And finally, so that I don't have to speak again, I'll point out that last December, we had a submission from a couple of organizations, the Chamber of Commerce and the Hotel Association, both of which asked council to consider that ratio and to adjust it. That conversation has not yet come up, and we have now received another letter from the Chamber of Commerce, which did not come in time to make this agenda, that we at least give consideration to what the ratio split ought to be, rather than just sort of inheriting what I view as being an incorrect split from the prior year. So I said everything I wanted to say about that at once. So there's a few points there that I am placing up here.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I see Mr. Given is, I think, had his hand up for a response. I will say that I am, of course, always concerned that we are in compliance with legislation. I will leave this to administration to explain what has come before us. My understanding of the changes to the legislation in 2016 was that no community could go above a 5-to-1 split. If you were already above and you reduced, you could not go back up. But for a community such as ours, where we are slightly over the now prescribed level, we were and are entitled to remain there, but if we reduce, we can never go back up. So my understanding of the legislation is that we are not offside at 5.1 to 1. But I do understand the concern that it is critical that we are not in breach of the legislation. My reading was that we could remain there given the wording of the legislation. I can go back and review that, of course. Mr. Given, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I was just going to say, in response to a very similar response, I believe that the implication of the legislative change was that nobody shall move beyond that. And some municipalities that were far beyond it, I think the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo is one in particular, that they had to make efforts to come into compliance. And so my understanding is similar to Mayor Ireland. I think an additional factor in Jasper's case may be the Lake Edith properties, which adds some complexity to our taxation that I admittedly don't fully understand yet, but I'm told by Ms. Melnichuk that adds a bit of a wrinkle that is a challenge for us. Having said that, if council wished to change this and go to a 5-to-1 ratio, then I think that there are a couple of courses of action that you could take. You could either direct administration to revise this bylaw prior to second reading to come to a 5-to-1 ratio, or council could, by motion, direct administration to develop the 2022 budget to be in accordance with the 5-to-1 ratio. And there would be, I suppose, positives and negatives to both approaches. I think the positive of the change to the 2021 year would be obviously that it would be a faster change. The downside to that approach would be that it would not give a lot of time for discussion about the impact of the change on residential properties. It would also be challenging for administration to calculate over the course of the next couple of weeks. Possible, but challenging, especially when we consider the procedure bylaw that says that agendas have to be done by Wednesday at 4 p.m. So really we're talking about if we want to see something at committee of the whole or some time for discussion, it should be done tomorrow afternoon. My suggestion would be that if this council believes that the next council should consider moving to the 5-to-1 ratio, an appropriate step might be to give administration that direction now so that we develop the 2022 budget that the next council will consider with the intention of demonstrating what the impact of that change would look like. So they can consider it in context of their full budget discussions at 2022. And making that motion today would clearly address the concern that has been raised by council, and would still allow council some space and time to assess the impact of that change before sort of implementing it. If we're to implement for 2021, it's going to be pretty quick, and I would be concerned that council wouldn't have enough time to assess that impact on homeowners, because essentially what will happen is that burden will be shifted from non-residential taxpayers to residential taxpayers. And that may be council's policy goal and appropriate, but I would imagine that council would like a chance to see what that actually looks like, discuss it with residential taxpayers and the business community, and then make a decision. And frankly, from an administrative perspective, for 2021, there would not be time for that dialogue in order for us to hit the legislated timelines for tax notices.
Mayor Ireland, we can see you and hear you.
Thank you. I was frozen out there momentarily. Mr. Given was talking about meeting timelines when I lost contact. So I'm not sure what I missed in there, but Councillor Demota, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I'm not trying to be petty here. What I'm trying to outline here is this is more of a reason that we should have this before us at committee of the whole prior to this coming to first and or second reading, because of all the stuff that's being discussed. You know, we're in a situation now where not going forward is going to put more pressure on administration. And because we didn't start this earlier, council's feeling pressured with, you know, the amount of changes that I think, you know, are perceived to be needed here. And we could have had all these discussions at committee of the whole, and we are where we are. So like, there's no point in going back and belaboring that. But in the future, and I think that we should bring this up at the next committee of the whole, is our overall process and how we're going to address big ticket items, larger discussions on things that impact the community. Again, I believe that the committee should be a staging area for things like this, and we could have prevented a lot of this discussion today and this debate here and move forward with first and second reading today. And I think that would have maybe expedited things and or sped things up for the next meeting if this gets delayed more. So just to make those comments, and just to say that I'm not prepared to move forward with a first reading today. But if somebody else wants to make that motion, I'm prepared to move to refer reading until then to review at committee of the whole.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Butler.
Well, just going back to the tax rate split, in my opinion, I'm in no means adverse to this conversation. I think it's a valid conversation we need to have. I don't think it's a conversation we have when we have first reading in front of us. As Councillor Butler said, we have been discussing it, and Councillor Butler in particular has been bringing it up for a number of years. We have had the opportunity to start that conversation, but starting that conversation on the day that we're having first reading, yes, granted, it's in the spotlight, yes, but we need to have the conversation. It needs to be a lengthy one. I think we have to explore all other alternative revenues before we burden the residential taxpayer with the excess of taxes needing to be paid if we do switch to a 5-to-1. So once we move from 5.1 to 5, there's no going back, as Mayor Ireland had suggested. So we have to make sure that we're making the right decision there. And I think we are exploring alternative revenues that may assist us in being able to drop that rate, paid parking, increased taxation on PHAs. There's numerous items that we can curb the burden on the residential taxpayers, and it's not the 2021 taxation time. I think let's have the conversation. Let's start it now for 2022, but let's make sure that we know that where we can earn more money and reduce the burden on both commercial and residential before we make that drastic move from 5.1 to 5, because we can't go back.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Butler. And then Councillor Demota.
You know, we come to a question of just how exactly is Council meant to initiate a discussion. As I pointed out, this has been brought up every year. And I have read the MGA closely on this, and while it's true that there is a loophole allowing a non-conforming property to remain, or municipality to remain such, the intent of the MGA is very clear, and that intent is that non-conforming municipalities are meant to, over time, bring themselves into conformation. The MGA states, according to the regulations, and I do know that the regulations around how that evolution should occur were never written, leaving us in the position where we can, I suppose, make an argument that we can and should continue as a non-conforming municipality. But I believe that the intent of the MGA is clear. And it concerns me that administration over these years, and please understand that I do respect that here this comes up now, but it comes up because this is the point at which the tax rate bylaw has been put in front of us. And when we had representation from the chamber that we should consider this change, the chamber was told, well, that is not a budgetary question. It is a part and parcel of the tax rate bylaw. Now the tax rate bylaw has come onto the agenda, and so it is sort of put under the spotlight. I think we should conform to the intent of the MGA. What I would like to ask, through you, Mayor Ireland, Mr. Given, is Mr. Given has referenced legislated timelines. So what is the legislated timeline? When does the tax rate bylaw have to be passed? And when do tax notices have to go out according to the MGA? Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Given.
Your Worship, I can speak to the first part of that, Councillor Butler. I don't have the detail on the specific date that the tax notices would need to be sent out. I'd have to rely on Ms. Melanchuk or others in administration for that in the moment. But the advice that I received is that in order for us to meet those timelines, we would have to have third and final reading of the bylaw at the next regular council meeting, which would be the June 1st meeting. But in terms of the further detail of, the date that the notices need to be sent out, I would have to get back to council with that because I don't have it at hand right now.
Councillor Demota.
Well, I just wanted to say that Councillor Wilson had some really good points, and I support those. My idea is to provide as much clarity to the community as possible, and even though we are kind of in a crux here for information, and I understand people had holiday time and we have a new CAO, and just getting up to speed and getting everything done at the same time is a bit challenging. Councillor Butler had some good points about this being in front of us and the chamber coming forward earlier and those discussions. So regardless of, this being the year or not the year, we don't know what the differences in the ratios might look like if we were to conform with moving forward to be in line with the MGA. So those discussions, even then, we don't know what the change would look like regardless. So I think, we need to move forward with a little bit more clarity. And regardless of what gets moved today, I think that we need to have some sort of consolidated information on the overall budget to get all the numbers in place so that the community knows what is being decided on as a whole and by department, and to have a little bit more clarity on what the changes in the ratio might be, if that's the desire of council to go forward with that during this cycle.
Councillor Keller-Harrenty and then Deputy Mayor McGrath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Ireland. This conversation we've had on and off. We talked about it even on our past council, but when we came to this, it has never been decided that we should move forward 5-1. But when I look at, we'll say, my house, and I'm going to say it's roughly worth $500,000, and a building in S Block that's worth $500,000, I pay $980.38 a year to the town in taxes. That's pretty low. You know what I mean? Like, so if you balance it, if I paid another $100 a year, it brings me over $1,000. Yeah, my taxes are higher because I have Evergreen and I have Alberta taxes. But when I look at my taxes, and we always say, we live in the best town, we have the cheapest taxes. Like, so I pay $980.39 a year for my taxes in this town, for my house. That is pretty low. I think, we could easily bring it into the Alberta regulations.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Harrenty, Councillor McGrath, and then I will return to Councillor Demota.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. After listening to other councillors' perspectives, I certainly value them all. I would be in favor of moving on to our first reading for this tax rate bylaw for 2021 today. Ideally, if there is councillors that are wishing to see amendments made to the bylaw, they should bring them forward for second reading. And I do understand the intention behind Councillor Butler's statements of bringing ourselves in line with the MGA to a 5-1 ratio. But I would prefer to see that investigated and developed for the 2022 budget process, also including demonstrating what that would look like, as Mr. Given stated. And it is really important to consider what that impact of that change would be. Senior citizens that are on fixed incomes, and many of the residents that I'm in contact with today don't have much wiggle room this year. So I think that if I was going to agree to a 5-1 ratio change, that it will require time and it will require lots of mindful intention making sure that that impact to the residential taxpayers has been well thought out for a lengthy process, and being in the know from the residential taxpayers would be really important to me. So I wouldn't be prepared to move forward with that anytime soon. However, I do see the value in investigating that into the future.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Was there buried in that a motion?
There certainly can be if we're at that point. I wouldn't want to jump the gun if anyone else has anything to say, but I'm happy to make the motion today.
Thank you, Councillor DeMota.
Well, you know, I appreciate where everyone's coming from, and you know, when I look at the overall tax requisition, although we haven't seen the final numbers yet, I'm guessing that 6 million of the money that's being requisitioned in and around there is coming from non-residential. So, and we're looking at an industry or an area that is impacted by heavily by COVID. And those contribution dollars are going to be as, you know, impacted as well as the residents. So at least having the conversation right now and seeing what those numbers look like is definitely worth a discussion. Whether that gets decided this year or not, I would say that during these times, it might be a better time to consider a change to, because the industry that's, or part of the, I would say the commercial sector is being affected greatly by this, and you know, potential contribution could be afflicted. Thank you.
I see no further hands. In order to proceed with anything, I would certainly invite a motion. Councillor Sherlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought that there had been a motion and I was going to recommend some amendments and changes. I see no reason why we shouldn't go to the 5.0 to 1 split. So I certainly like that change in the bylaw. And, you know, subject to the, you say grammatical, the date change, that would be one of the corrections that I'd like to see done. And the last thing is providing a full definition of the abbreviations that are contained in this bylaw. I think it's not best practices to avoid doing that. We have $1 million fund from COVID, and it's, to me, we should take advantage of that and adjust the rate that's best for the community. And by staying at 5.1, well, we know that we have upset one of the sectors of the community, and we should, you know, we should correct that. Councillor Wilson said it's not a discussion to have today because of timeline, but when are we going to have that discussion? So I would like to see us start a small step and reduce the split to 5.0 in this year, in this current year. And I will be prepared to make a motion for first reading with those 3 changes. So that's the 5.0 split, the change of the date in the first whereas, and providing definitions and clarity of the acronyms and abbreviations that have been in the that are in the document now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trudeau. A necessary step forward. I appreciate that. Is there debate on that motion? So that is a motion to give first reading to the bylaw with 3 changes to it. A date change, a change from 5.1 to 1 to 5.0 to 1, and definitions of acronyms. Councillor McGrath.
Sorry, Mayor Ireland, Councillor Wilson had his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Councillor McGrath. Thank you for your motion, Councillor Sherlow. I think we got to be clear about this motion, though. The motion is to burden the residential taxpayers who have also been greatly affected by COVID. They've been laid off. They have mortgages to pay. So we're just switching. So yes, of course, the commercial sector has been brutalized by COVID, but so has their employees, and their employees are the residential taxpayers. So let's just put that out there. We're moving the tax, we're moving it onto the residential taxpayers in a time of need and in a time of struggle, and we're making that move quick. We're pulling the trigger on that very quickly. We're not having the conversation. We haven't explored alternative tax revenues. We haven't had the big conversation on this topic, and this is pretty rash. I don't support this.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Demota?
I appreciate the intent of this motion, but I'm with Councillor Wilson in that regard. And only because we haven't had the opportunity to have a broader discussion and a better discussion about this and leading up, and then all of a sudden we're pressed with the tax deadline, which I don't think there's a date in it, but it says July. So we might have a little bit of wiggle room there as far as getting the tax notices out. And I don't know what the penalties are for not getting them out in time, but we are still in a pandemic, and things have been relieved in a lot of areas, and we might have some leniency in getting those out. But I think that, we're feeling pressured, and I don't, we might be positioned to make a decision soon, but I don't want to be putting that extra burden on administration or to rush this, because we make mistakes when we're rushed. And, and Councillor Wilson's right, there are different people and areas in the community that are feeling pressure right now. And the fact that we haven't had a proper debate, and we're kind of stick handling the debate here now, I would have liked to have a little bit more, or like to have a little bit more discussion on this, so that we're not, having this type of opposition with each other, because I think we can move forward collectively in a bridge building manner to get to some type of resolution down the road. And I don't think that there's a need to be pressured on either side to get this done. So let's start the work today. Whether that means moving forward with a first reading or not. I'm not in favor with the one that's on the table, but I would like to review the discussion a little bit more. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I too would not be prepared to vote in favor of the motion as it is presented. Is there a desire to break those 3 amendments into 3 separate questions? If so, I could probably vote on 2 of the 3, recognizing that the date and the definitions would benefit from change.
Point of privilege.
Sorry, thank you for that, Councillor McGrath. I'm thinking about how that might occur procedurally. The motion was a motion to give first reading with changes, rather than a motion to approve for first reading and then deal with amendments. So whether I can split that motion, I'm not entirely sure, but give me a moment more to think about procedurally how we can do that. Mr. Given, if you want to contribute to that procedural discussion, I'll allow that, and then I'll turn to Councillor Demota.
Yes, Your Worship. I guess my experience would be that a motion for first reading is simply to get the matter on the table. And so that would be a standalone motion to have first reading. And then if there is any additional direction to administration of changes or amendments that need to be made, that those would be motions that would be made independently after first reading. So it's sort of, first reading basically says, we want to talk about this bylaw, yes or no. And then after that is on the table for discussion, then any amendments could be made by motion independently, which would give council members the opportunity vote their will on each of the items. I think the challenge is wrapping up amendments when we haven't even decided if first reading is on the table or not. So I think you have to do that first and then have the motions for amendments.
I agree. And with respect to Councillor Journeau, he chose, and he certainly is right, to make a motion that included changes rather than a motion for first reading as it was presented. So I think I have to respect that he has a right to put forward the motion that he chooses. And I'm not sure that I can split that. The unfortunate result is that it might get defeated, but then we can still go back and follow the process that you've outlined, Mr. Given, that is get something on the table and then deal with a series of amendments before it goes to second reading. And that's my conundrum now. Councillor Demota.
I would like to move the council refer first reading of the proposed 2021 tax rates bylaw to committee of the whole on May 24th for further consideration and discussion.
That would be, I think, a motion to defer the motion that is currently before us. So we have Councillor Journeau's motion. I can't accept a new motion. We have a motion on the floor. I can accept a motion to amend, or I believe I can accept a motion to defer.
Well, it's to refer, sir.
Okay, well, it amounts to the same. But
I think procedurally we're allowed to do so.
We are, but what are we referring? We're referring Councillor Journeau's motion, I believe. I don't think I can accept a fresh motion to refer something else in the middle of a debate on a motion that is properly before us.
Okay.
Councillor McGrath.
See, we vote on the motion and then we move on to see what's next.
Thank you. That is a call for calling the question. And so the question is on Councillor Trudeau's motion to give first reading to bylaw number 236, but with it presented with 3 relevant changes to what has been presented, and that is date, change of tax rates, and the addition of definitions. So that is the motion. Councillor Journeau, I'll let you close debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The 2 of these items are housekeeping items, so I don't think we have to go through a debate and motion on that. The main reason for the split discussion is to bring us in line with our rules and regulation, the world in which we live in. And we've been pushing the boundary right to the limit, and now we've exceeded. So all I want to do is bring us back in line and move from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. I will call the question. I won't repeat the question, but all in favor of the motion made by Councillor Journeau? Opposed? That motion is defeated. 4 opposed. 5 opposed. That takes us back to a blank slate. Councillor Demota.
Okay, I'm afraid we might be here all day debating or voting on renditions of a first reading. So I move that council refer discussions of the tax rates, the 21 tax rates bylaw to committee of the whole for May 24th for further discussion and consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. I think that is in order. Do you want to speak further to that motion?
No, I think I've said enough, and then we can discuss all of the other matters today or a later date.
Okay. For myself, I don't tend to do this, but my inclination is to follow the advice of administration and to give first reading today to something so that it is properly before us at committee of the whole. If we choose to refer it, as I think may be the case, we should be referring something specific so we all know what is before us. And then second reading, before we get to second reading, we can have whatever amendments we choose. But rather than to simply refer the discussion even on first reading to committee of the whole, seems to me to remove an opportunity today to make some progress, no matter how minimal. And I'd prefer to see at least some progress. Councillor DeBoda, I see you, but you will be entitled to close in any event. So Councillor Butler, go ahead.
Even though I'm in alignment with the intent of Councillor DeMota's motion, I agree that given that bylaw requires three readings, and the point of having 3 readings is to allow for a discussion and adjustment of the bylaw through that process, I also would prefer to at least see first reading of a bylaw pass. And then we can place it on the agenda for discussion at committee of the whole, so that if we wanted to propose some amendments, such as to the rate or anything else in the interim at second reading, then we could do so. So while I would be happy to see discussion at committee of the whole, I would prefer to see that discussion in the context of having first reading of a bylaw on the record. The suggestion that that first reading include the change to a 5-to-1 ratio, which I'm still in favor of, failed. So perhaps if another councillor wishes to make a motion to give first reading to the bylaw as written, those of us who don't like the ratio can vote against it. We can still have an opportunity to discuss that, but at least we have something on the table. I'll also mention that I'm not sure that we need a motion to reference the housekeeping items, the mistakes or typos that are in there. I think administration could simply make those adjustments. And then when we see the bylaw before us, second reading, those things could have been adjusted.
Great, thank you, Councillor Butler. Anything further, Councillor McGrath?
I will not be able to vote in favor of this motion today, Councillor DeMota, as agreed with Mayor Ireland and as presented options that procedurally make better sense for today's meeting. I would be more in favor of moving through the first reading today, making amendments following that motion, and moving forward with second reading when councillors have had an opportunity to add the amendments they desire.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor DeMota? You had your hand up.
Well, I feel like we're splitting hairs here. So, you know, in the spirit of moving this forward, I'll make an amendment to this. And I'll move, if I may, that council give first reading to the 2021 taxation rates bylaw and refer further discussion to committee of the whole on May 24th for consideration.
Thank you, Councillor DeMota. I struggle to say that that would be an amendment, but what I would suggest is that if you withdraw the motion that you made earlier, which was referral of everything, if I'm sensing there would be no objection from council for you to withdraw, and then we will substitute a new motion.
Sure.
Thank you. Is there any objection to Councillor DeMota withdrawing his initial motion? I see none. So the motion then is to give first reading to bylaw number 236 and to refer further discussion with respect to second reading to committee of the whole for May 25th, whatever the next date is. Any discussion on that motion? Any further debate? It appears we have landed. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Butler.
Now that we're actually debating a motion on this iteration of the tax rate bylaw. I am not in favor of it for the reasons that I have already stated specifically. I'm unhappy with the tax ratio that I think should have been changed. And secondly, I am also very concerned about the point that Councillor Demoda raised earlier, that in this bylaw, we are referencing a budget which has still not yet been presented, and the community can't look at and understand where that $22 million number and the other numbers here are coming from. I know this motion will pass, and that's fine. But I wanted, since I'm going to vote against it, to clarify specifically the two reasons that I'm voting against it. Thank you.
Councillor Trudeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not be supporting, only because I would not support any motion or bylaw that puts us in non-compliance with the rules and regulation that we live in. Thank you.
Anything further? Councillor Keller-Hrampe and then Councillor Wilson.
If my understanding is correct, we're making this motion to put the bylaw on the table. At second reading, we can change, debate, come up with ideas if we want to change the tax rate. Am I correct, Maryland, Mr. Gunn?
Yes.
So in order to get this on the table for next week's conversation, I will support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Hrampe. Councillor Wilson.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, Councillor Keller-Hrampe. Thank you. I was just going to enter into a little bit of debate with Councillor Butler and Councillor Sherlow, who have in the past supported a 5.1 to 1 ratio, and now during a COVID year, it's the imminent time to vote against it. I find that unbecoming. I think that yeah, let's have the conversation, but just in principle to vote against the first reading seems a bit I'm lost for words, really. We can have the discussion on the tax rate, but this is moving forward just in first reading. So you're just voting as a matter of principle this time during a COVID year. I don't find that very very cool.
Councillor Butler.
Unbecoming and ill-informed, I have voted against the 5.1 ratio in earlier years. I think we should focus on the issues.
Okay. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, let's focus on the issues, which means moving forward on the discussion of this motion. I'm all for that, and I'm all for the discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Demoda, I will return to you. You are entitled to close debate. I just wanted to say I will vote in favor of the motion. I am very sensitive to any suggestion that we are offside the legislation and in a sense taking advantage of what was described as a loophole. I don't share that view. I think that the legislation was designed recognizing the extingent circumstances of some municipalities and in a sense grandfathering where people were at. And we recognize grandfathering clauses in all sorts of legislation, and those who take advantage of them when they are offered by other levels of government are not in non-compliance. So I do not accept that there is a legal need for us to become in compliance. I think we are in compliance. That can be debated, and that's fine. On that simple question, though, of moving from 5.1 to 5, I am not the least bit satisfied that that resolves an issue for anybody, even those who want us to adjust the ratio between residential and non-residential. I don't read their entreaties to us to suggest that 5 to 1 solves the problem. I think they might be looking for much less than that. So we please nobody by going, I think, down 0.1 in the ratio, and that deserves a full discussion. And so if we can get through first reading today and continue those discussions, I'm perfectly happy with that. And so I will vote in favor of the motion, anticipating that in the coming week or two, we can have a more fulsome discussion about the tax rate. But if I was satisfied that we were legally offside, I would be very much different in my approach to this. But I think that we are entitled to take advantage of the legislation as it reads. Councillor Demota, I turn to you to close debate.
Well, I'm not closing debate on this because it's not really my motion. So, and you know, from this discussion, I'm not ready to move forward with that. If somebody else wants to make the motion, that's fine. It's not my motion that's on the floor. So I just wanted to clarify that, and I'm sorry if there was any confusion on my part in turning that around. So that this wasn't. I withdrew my motion, and I'm sorry if I misunderstood the inclination for me to move this forward. And I just want to say that I'm not coming to the defense of other councillors, but I do not appreciate any condescending tone towards councillors by anyone. And I find it as a form of bullying. And I don't like that. We went through this last year and I thought we were over that. And I don't like any pontification of that sort, especially specifically when I feel that there's a perception of people's nature coming into question. I'm very disappointed in some of those comments.
Sorry, somebody perhaps mute. Councillor McGrath, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. Being that there is no motion on the table, I'd like to move that council read for the first time bylaw number 236, Taxation Rates Bylaw 2021, being a bylaw of the Specialized Municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to authorize the rates of taxation to be levied against accessible property within the municipality of Jasper for the 2021 taxation year.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. I think we have debated the motion. So unless there is anything further, Councillor Journeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After you provided clarification on whether or not we are in compliance, I will support this to get this process going. Thank you.
Thank you. I will call the question then to give first reading to the bylaw, and only first reading. All in favor? Opposed? There are 2 opposed. That is carried. The bylaw has first reading. If there is a councillor now who wishes to refer the matter to committee of the whole, that would be my understanding of more or less where we had landed in discussion. Councillor Kelleher-MP.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I make a motion that we refer this bylaw to Committee of the Whole on May 25th for further discussion on the tax rate and split.
Thank you, Councillor Kelleher-MP. Is there any debate on that motion to refer the matter to Committee of the Whole? Councillor Butler.
Not debate, but an opportunity to make a request that at the time, could we have some clarity as to, from administration, as to what the legislated timeframes that we are dealing with are. That's all, thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's nothing further, I will call the question for referral to Committee of the Whole for next week. All in favor? Any opposed? There is 1 opposed. That is carried. In concert with that, Councillor Butler had indicated a request for confirmation of timelines, unless I see an objection from anybody. I think that that is the will of council. So you can take that as a council request, Mr. Given, rather than a request from an individual councillor. I would suggest, again, in the absence of objection from councillor, and it's a small item, but I note in the proposed bylaw that has been given first reading, there is reference to Lake Edith 7 months. I wonder what happens to Lake Edith properties that have 12-month leases, and whether that is something that ought to be addressed. Maybe they fit in somewhere, but if in the absence of objection from council, I would like to have an answer to that question for next week. And similarly, if council agrees, I am unclear about the total assessment for the municipality from the graph that is shown at the end of the preambles. There are different amounts for residential and non-residential in each of 3 categories. Would it be safe to say that if I take the maximum amount in each and add those up, that is our total assessment? It's curious to me what the assessment is, because we have different numbers. Again, a small matter, but if somebody could explain next week what our total assessment is, that would be appreciated. Is there any other information that councillors can identify now to assist administration to be prepared for discussions again next week? Councillor DeMota?
I'm not sure if we need a motion to ask administration for some sort of consolidated net tax envelope description of the budget. That's something, again, that we're used to, and I'm sorry that I'm belaboring this, but I believe that it provides a lot of clarity for us, and I'd like to have that before council, before it gets issued on our website or something like that. So if that needs be, then I'm willing to make that motion. When it comes down to the discussion for requisitioning for the policing, I would like to have that as a discussion, you know, as far as providing a different level of clarity on our tax requisitions. And then obviously, as discussed, reviewing some of the definitions and whether they're needed or not. And there was a reference to maybe people not reading it. I did get a text over the weekend asking me what a dip was. So anyway, so I thought that was relevant to discuss. So with those in mind, if we don't need a motion for those and those are understood to be part of the discussion, then I'm willing to just go forward with that.
Thank you, Councillor DeMota. I saw Mr. Given nodding. The only remark I might make is with respect to timing. And so Mr. Given had indicated earlier that if something is to be on the agenda for Friday, arising from today's meeting, that gives them essentially tomorrow to do it. And I'd like Mr. Given to be able to explain whether or not there is sufficient time for that.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Councillor DeMota, appreciate you had requested that information previously. Administration had developed that after council finalized the budget. There were some minor errors and omissions that we wanted to correct, but it is formatted consistent with previous years, and that's ready to go. So that's not a problem to have for the agenda package for next week, Your Worship. All the other items, I think, are subject to council discussion and debate, and we will obviously take care of any of the minor textual, changes that we need to make in terms of that date and the typos, that type of thing. We'll take care of that naturally, and so you'll see it in a clean copy with those textual revisions for next week. and any of the other matters that council wishes to debate, like the treatment of the policing costs, the 5-to-1 ratio, or other sort of principles, then that would be up to council discussion debate. But we will deliver council a clean copy with the typos corrected and the abbreviations spelled out, because I think both of those are just administrative matters. We will also be in a position to provide a view of the budget consistent with previous years and consistent with the decisions that council made at its final budget meeting this year. And that should not be a problem to have that for next week's council committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Given. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. In preparation for next week's committee of the whole meeting, I have no expectation from administration, understanding the timeline that has been laid out to us already, and as you just stated, Mayor Ireland. But for council's information, if there is a desire from councillors to move from a 5.1 to a 5-to-1 ratio, it would be something that I would not be able to vote in favor of without assessing the impact of that change and seeing demonstration of what that change would look like. So just for council's information, I wouldn't be able to support that in discussion next week or by motion in the following regular meeting.
Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor McGrath. Councillor Keller-Rempe.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, Mr. Given. I am in favor of the split, I'm going to be honest. And I understand it's a COVID year, and I understand the setback on residents. So if we were to make a change, what I'd be interested in the total amount difference that would make on residential taxes. And if we could take a portion of the most grant to offset that for 2021, and then in 2022 bring in that rate. So if we could have some of those figures, I'd really appreciate that, Mr. Given.
Mr. Given.
Your Worship, but Councillor Kelleher's MP's point, I understand the approach that you're suggesting, and administration will do our best to be able to deliver some of that information at the council committee of the whole meeting. But given our publishing timelines, we wouldn't be able to have it in the agenda package. So if council is comfortable with administration doing some of that homework so that we can have something to discuss, we will do our best to have that. But unfortunately, I can't commit to that. We'd be able to have it for you by Friday for the publishing deadline, which is supposed to be by the end of tomorrow. So I understand the point. Everybody will be interested in what the financial total is and the impact is. We will do our best to gather that information to provide council as much information as possible for their consideration next week, but it would be at the table.
That's fine, Mr. Given.
All right, thank you all for that robust discussion. We have now been proceeding for approaching 2 hours. We have concluded agenda item 7. Before we move to agenda item 8, I am going to propose a brief recess. I have 11:23. I'll give us 7 minutes and we will reconvene at 11:30. So I will see you all then. Thank you. 11:32, so I will call us back into session. We are at agenda item 8, which I think we reverted to the old wording RFDs. In any event, we have before us as agenda item 8.1, Bonhomme and Cabin Creek Drive speed reduction. And Mr. Given, are you going to lead us through that?
Yes, Your Worship. Very brief introduction. If council has any questions about the operational side, Mr. Greathead is here. But just in terms of process, why this is here, on March 23rd at the Council Committee of the Whole meeting, administration did present a request with respect to some traffic calming and signalization, crosswalk, and a number of other concerns. Out of that discussion, council made a specific motion that was carried by all of council to refer to council that speed limits be reduced on the entirety of Bonhomme and Cabin Creek Drive. So that motion was made by council in a committee of the whole setting and was intended to come forward. Administration, in our review of the motion action list, identified that that hadn't been captured. And so we wanted to ensure that we followed up to get it here in accordance with that motion that was supported unanimously at the committee of the whole. So this is here for council's consideration. You can see in the report a map which would identify the sections of that roadway or those roadways which are already 30 kilometers an hour, and that is the area identified in yellow. And then the sections which, if council chooses to approve this reduction in speed, would be changed from 50 to 30 would be those areas that are highlighted in blue. And so administration is simply bringing this forward as a result of our regular practice. And I'm thankful that the team provided that review of the motion action list and that we're able to catch this item because we want to ensure that where council made a motion to bring something forward, that it does happen. And so with that, I'll turn it over to council for discussion and motions that may arise.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Almost a tie there. Councillor Wilson and Councillor Demota.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I just would like to thank administration for bringing this one back. I was pleased to see it on the agenda. I think it's going to be an excellent change along that roadway, and the safety for many residents will be better. What's the word? More beneficial. I don't know. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And would you need a motion on this today? Or sorry, I came in a little bit late. I would be pleased to make the motion that council approve reducing the speed limit to 30 kilometers an hour along the entirety of Bonhomme Street and Cabin Creek Drive.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Having made the motion, I think I can consider that you've already spoken to it, but you will be allowed to close again. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, just I think a housekeeping matter for the most part. When we went through the motion task list last week, I was under the impression that this was coming up June 1st as indicated in the motion task list. It didn't say by June 1st or in June at some time. So it did say June 1st. So I was under the perception that this was going to come to committee with what's in front of us today. And then have other recommendations from administration. So I see that administration's in favor, but I don't see any other details in implementation or other items like that.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Mr. Given.
Your Worship, two things for clarity. Administration takes no position on the issue. Administration isn't in favor or opposed. Administration is neutral, and if council chooses to make this, this change, we'll implement it. The reason that it's here today is because it was directed to refer it to council. In the motion action list, I think it's there because there was a little bit of a lack of clarity about the motion to refer rather than recommend, which we've been using. And the dates in the motion action list should be interpreted by council as target dates. If we can deliver something sooner, absolutely we'll strive to do that. If it turns out that we can't deliver something on a date that we, by the target that we'd suggested, then we'd have that discussion with council at the motion action list. So we would never hold anything because we said that, oh, well, it's not going to come for a few weeks and let's just hold that. If we can deliver something to council, we will. And just to be 100% clear, administration is not proposing this. This is a direct result of the motion that was made at committee of the whole to bring this forward.
Right. If I may follow up, I just think for us in the future, I think it's good to be clear on maybe distinguishing what referring to council or committee of the whole again. And I'm not suggesting that Councillor Wilson in his motion had a different intent. I had a different understanding of it. And I guess maybe sometimes asking for clarity helps out. But I also find that, I was going to address this and maybe new business here going forward. I'd like to bring up for next week, as a topic for discussion is a process thing. So if we don't see something for a month or 6 weeks or 5 weeks, whatever the idea might be. I think maybe bringing it forward to committee of the whole, just so we're better prepared in the debate going forward for this. I'm in favor of voting for this today. It's more of a process thing for me. So just to iron out a few things and misunderstandings for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota, and I will invite you if you wish to bring that up again as new business. However, we have a motion before council now. Is there any further debate on that motion? And that is for council to approve a reduction of speed on the entirety of Bonhomme and Cabin Creek Drive. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and through you to Councillor Wilson. Thank you for bringing this forward. I'm certainly in favor of speed reduction, frankly, throughout the community, and speed reduction on this street. And if council wishes to deal with this motion today, I'll vote in favor of it. However, I maybe have undue concern. Maybe it's misplaced, but I am always concerned about unintended consequences. We debated really pretty thoroughly and ad nauseum the concept of reducing speed limit throughout the entire community some time ago, again, at Councillor Wilson's instigation, which I appreciated then and I do now. And then because we couldn't seem to come to full agreement on reducing speed limit throughout the community, Councillor Wilson, I think, withdrew that motion, and we sort of moved on. The concern I have is this: at that time, when we looked at starting to sort of approach the more piecemeal approach, this route should be 30, that route should be 30. It was pointed out by administration at that time that everywhere we implement a 30 zone, we have to indicate where that 30 zone ends. And so I'm certainly in favor of all of Bonhomme and Cabin Creek being 30, but I'm a little concerned about the forest of signage that may result, because as I understood from what we were told then by administration, every intersecting street is now going to have a sign on it that says essentially resume 50. So including some of the really tiny little streets where only a fool would try to drive 50, like Aspen Avenue, the entirety of the west end of town, Poplar, Patricia, Cabin Creek Drive, or sorry, not Cabin Creek Drive, Willow. They're all now going to have signs, as I understand, that we would have to do signs that say 50. And it starts to just be silly that we have. I hear two complaints from people in town about speed. By far the most common is people drive too fast. And yes, we need to deal with that. But absolutely, the second most common complaint I hear from people is, geez, we've got 30 here, we've got 50 here, we've got 30 here. And it just becomes silly. So I'm in favor of this, but I'm a little worried about what actual implementation might look like. I did a quick count. I think we need 30 new signs at least, including those that will direct people back to driving 50 on a street that nobody should be driving 50 on. Frankly, again, I'm in favor of this, but I'd be more in favor of just saying, make the whole town 30. Because this doesn't make any more sense with around that issue of we got 30 here and 50 there and 30 here and 50 there. This doesn't make any more sense. It might actually make the problem worse despite our best efforts. And I don't want us to go to this extent only to find that we've kind of created a monster of a spider's web of 30s and 50s and 30s and 50s. Again, I am not speaking against the motion, but I wonder if we should think whether this is enough or whether we should take a broader view. Believe me, I don't want to be talking about this for the next 4 months. I'm throwing that out there for consideration. If this is the motion, I'll vote in favor of it. But have we really thought about what implementation would look like? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler, I see you, Councillor DeBoda, but I will turn first to Mr. Given, who has an administrative response, I presume.
Yes, to Councillor Butler's concern about implementation, our traffic bylaw actually has a specific point that says the speed limit on all roadways in the town shall be 50 kilometers per hour, except as listed in Schedule B of the bylaw. So there is a general provision that unless otherwise noted, all areas are 50 kilometers an hour. So that means that administration only needs to sign the areas that are 30 kilometers an hour. All other areas are 50 kilometers an hour. So there's not a need to install signs to inform people that they are allowed to move up to 50 kilometers. It is essentially the reverse, that people are allowed to move 50 kilometers an hour, except for where there are signs noting a lower speed limit. So Councillor Butler, the signage question would be really, in my estimation, minimal in nature, would not require us to sign all other side streets where the people can transition back to 50 kilometers in the way that our traffic bylaw is written.
Thank you, Mr. Given. I'll allow Councillor Butler to have a follow-up, and then I'll turn to Councillor DeMoto.
Well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate hearing that. And I will say that it is an absolutely different understanding than was given to us a couple of years ago. So I appreciate that. I will just then point out that there are certainly areas of our town where we have 50 posted coming off 30 Street. One of them, for example, is Collin Crescent, probably the narrowest street in town. And when one turns off of Pyramid Lake Road, a 4-lane divided thoroughfare by our standards, and you drive on to the narrowest street in town, there's a sign there that says 50. So it would be great if that is the interpretation of administration, and if we go down the road, what we're doing here, that we maybe just take some of those signs away, because they're almost an invitation to, oh, now you should go 50. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor DeModa, and then Councillor Chernow.
Thank you for letting me speak again. I know there's a motion on the table, and technically we're permitted to speak once, but I'm just adding a little bit to the history, because we've gone down this road before, pardon the pun, and the same type of discussion came up because of this and the closing off of different areas. And then at the time when this was originally brought up, the Caribou Creek units were getting built, and then some people that were in the units on Patricia Street, where Bonhomme gets closed off from the 30 zone in the proposal, was saying, because they had young families at the time, were saying that vehicles were speeding by there at top speed, and why can't it be 30 in front of our place as well? And then the whole piecemealing thing got into discussion, because people in other areas were reaching out saying that, you know, my street, like Collin or whatever, these narrow streets should be 30 as well. And then, so I might have been an instigator in not voting in favor because of this piecemeal effort, and there just wasn't a lot of clarity. And at the time, and if it's changed, I do believe that there was a lot of signage issue as well in closing off. And I still believe from Mr. Greathead's last presentation that there are signage requirements. I don't know exactly where, but even though it is a broad 50, I think that in closing things off properly, that we do need more signage if we're going to go down this road. But I am in favor of going forward with this, because I believe that we were hindered in the last process. So if this triggers or provides some sort of trickle that we may be able to address some reductions in other areas in the community, so be it. I've learned my lesson once, and I think now that this is for the number one thing is safety in the community, and if we're going to, this is a good start. So I'm willing to go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeModa. Councillor Chernow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this. However, I have a question on Patricia Crescent. Is the speed limit there presently 30? And if not, I would like to see it included because that is part of Cabin Creek development. We have the Long Street Cabin Creek development at 30, and I think to be consistent and clear we should include the speed limit reduction of 30 to Patricia Crescent.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. Mr. Gibbon, is anybody able to speak to the speed limit on Patricia Crescent?
Your Worship, I just would say first, the motion is specific that it is Cabin Creek Drive, and so there's a start to Cabin Creek Drive and an end, and so that's the only part that administration would interpret this motion to apply to. If I look at our bylaw, it is not noted. Patricia Crescent is not noted as an area where the speed limit is 30 kilometers an hour. That's a bit of an indirect answer, Councillor Journeau, but if I look at the list of places that are 30 kilometers an hour already, Patricia Crescent doesn't appear to be listed. Are we perhaps talking about Patricia Street, Councillor Journeau, just for my clarity?
So we're gonna have
not, thank you. No, just Patricia Crescent. Patricia Crescent is a very short street in the middle of Cabin Creek. We have the big long street that surrounds it at 30, and I think that just makes sense, and it's just consistency and clarity to include that. If you're also aware that there's a sign right at the corner of Brewster Crescent, handmade, homemade sign, slow down, slow down, slow down. And that's the start of that zone, which I would like to see reduced to 30. That's the reason for my question. I don't know what the speed limit is, but I would like to see it included in the 30.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. I will return to you, Councillor Wilson, in just a moment. It was your motion and you are entitled to close debate. Is there anything from any other councillor? All right, go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Well, way back when we just started talking about speed limits, my motion was kind of all encompassing. It didn't work out, so we switched to the piecemealing approach, which hopefully is going to work for us. And yeah, this most likely won't be the only one we put forward. And if residents have concern of certain areas, please send me an email and I'll put a motion forward, because there are some questionable areas in town. Councillor Journeau, I agree with you. The inside loop of Cabin Creek, I guess you're calling it Patricia Circle. I would be more than open to a friendly amendment to include that, because yes, as you state, it is a very tight road. Again, lots of corners, lots of families, and although most of all, I want to get this motion passed and moved forward and check it off the list. Although, Councillor Journeau, please, if you would like to amend, please do.
Sorry, I had muted myself. Councillor Journeau.
Mr. Mayor, if you'll allow me, I'll be pleased to make that amendment to include Patricia Crescent, not Patricia Circle, Patricia Crescent in this motion. To make Cabin Creek consistent under one speed limit.
Your Worship, just for clarity on Councillor Journeau's motion or amendment, my understanding from the team is that the area under discussion may have been Patricia Crescent until about 2010, but now under all maps that I can see, it is reflected as Patricia Street. So I just want to make sure that we get the names correct. I think the intent is Patricia Street from the intersection, from the two places where it intersects with Cabin Creek Road. So there are 2 points where Patricia Street connects with Cabin Creek Road. And I think the understanding, and my understanding is, of Councillor Journeau's intent, is that area between those two intersections be included at 30 kilometers an hour. But it is on all maps that I can find and confirmed with other members of the team that have been in Jasper longer. They're identifying that as Patricia Street. And I think the name may just have changed at some point in the past.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Councillor Keller-Rempe, I think I saw your hand. I just want to address a procedural issue, and it's not the first time today that I've been presented with what I see as a bit of a challenge. This is before council as a result of a motion previously by Councillor Wilson to refer a specific matter to council, directly to council rather than to committee of the whole. And that reference was restricted to Bonhomme Street and Cabin Creek Drive. So I'm not sure that this is in the nature of a friendly amendment. It's not to say that it couldn't be an amendment, but it is a change without any notice to the public whatsoever. Anybody who watched on March 23rd and read today's agenda would understand that council was going to discuss a proposed reduction of speed limits in a particular area and not beyond that. So we can, I think, deal with it as
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if you can hear us, you froze.
All right, I'm having some bandwidth issues apparently, so I have turned off my camera. Are councillors able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I see some nods. I apologize. I was explaining a procedural difficulty. I'm not sure whether you heard any of that explanation, but I see a nod from Mr. Given, so you understand the nature of that. So, Councillor Journeau, I've now lost sight of you. If you wish to make an amendment, I think that an amendment would be in order, not as a friendly amendment. But I will say that I hesitate to expand the scope too much. I do appreciate comments earlier about piecemealing this, but I think we have a duty to the public as well to let them know what is up for debate. And this is not something that anyone would have foreseen was up for debate before council today. But with that cautionary note, process is very much in the hands of council, so I leave it to you. And Councillor Keller-Rempe, I think I had recognized you earlier and hadn't yet returned to you.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'm in favor of this motion, and I'm also in favor of the amendment for Patricia Street, that I think used to be known as Patricia Crescent. When I looked at this originally, I thought that was part of it because to me, that's part of Cabin Creek. And I guess I was wrong, but I would be in favor of that amendment to Councillor Wilson's motion. I think that is all one section down there. There's a lot of children, a lot of playgrounds in that area. And it's very populated with children. I think it's one of the most areas in town next to Aspen Gardens that has the most children. So I am totally in favor of this motion.
All right, and would you say this motion, I am going to presume that you mean a motion to amend Councillor Wilson's motion to include that section of Patricia Street between its two intersections with Cabin Creek Drive?
That's correct, Ireland.
Okay. Thank you. If there's no further debate or discussion on that item, I can call the question on the amendment. Councillor Journeau, are you trying to get my attention? No. All right, so a motion to amend the main motion to include Patricia Street between its intersections with Cabin Creek Drive. All in favor? Sorry, I'll put on my camera long enough to vote. Any opposed? There is one opposed. That motion is carried. And we are back then to the main motion, Councillor Wilson's motion to reduce speed limits, and now it's all of Bonhomme, Cabin Creek Drive, and that identified portion of Patricia Street. Any further debate on that motion? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and not to be seen as not in favor of reducing speed limits on that far end of Patricia Street, including the Cabin Creek area. I just wasn't necessarily in a place where I could assume that the community members that reside on that end of Patricia Street had fair enough warning or foresight to know that we were speaking of this today. So I'm certainly supportive of reducing speed limits in our community and making the community a safer place. So I absolutely will vote in favor of this motion as presented.
Thank you for that, Councillor McGrath. If there are no further, if there is no further debate, Councillor Demota, before I call the question.
Well, this is where I was kind of having issues because we don't have kind of a detailed plan, and now we've made adjustments. And Councillor McGrath is right. Like, you know, the people in that area weren't, those added areas weren't aware, even though that some of the people were in the areas that were considered on March 23rd, I don't think have proper notice. So this is why, again, and I'm sorry if I'm flogging a dead horse here, but it's so important to get stuff in front of a council for discussion, a committee of the whole, before we're making decisions like this. And this is a similar issue again on why this didn't go forward last time. We were considering this 5-6 years ago. So I'm right now I'm on the fence. I want to move forward with this, but Councillor McGrath has a good point. I mean, all of a sudden, like I didn't know that the speed limit's going to change in front of my house tomorrow, and it might not be tomorrow. It could be September, it could be December, it could be March of last year, but we don't have a plan in place. And I just don't, I don't like this. It feels Keystone Cop-ish to me. And I think that we should be better prepared collectively, administratively, and as councillors, and setting the community up for success. So I'm not comfortable right now. I'm a little frustrated, and I'm supposed to vote. I have to vote, and that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Keller-Happy.
Just remembering back to 2.5 years ago, could be 3, when we had this discussion. At that time, Councillor Wilson had proposed that we put the whole town down to 30 and keep Connaught 50. We went through several months of debate. And clearly during that debate, it came out that nobody wanted Connaught, except for some people, to go down to 30. That was one of the main areas they wanted 50. I know many residents in Cabin Creek wanted all of Cabin Creek, the area around Caribou, to go down to 30. I think we go ahead with the vote today, and that we will be told within a week if those residents are not happy. We'll either make the right decision or the wrong decision. We can always come back and reverse it. But I have this fear that this is going to go back to 3 years ago, and it will never get done. And so I think we need to make a stand. We need to move forward. There's so many children down in this area. And I drive down there on and off, and I can never go more than 20 in any of that area. There's so many cars, so many children. It's a worry. And as a councillor, we need to keep these children safe in these areas. So I think we vote. If the residents down there are not happy, they will let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Grampy. I endorse those comments, and there is no reverse word in the motion. It's just slow down, and for that reason, I agree with your comments. If there is nothing further, I will call the question, and that is on the main motion as amended. All in favor? Those opposed? It appeared to me that there were none opposed. As I say, I'm having some bandwidth issues, so things freeze temporarily, but that motion is passed, and my record is that there were none opposed. That takes us to 8.2. In municipal, Mr. Given.
Thanks, Your Worship. This one, unlike the last item, came through a very regular process of arriving at committee first. So it is here today after being recommended forward via committee. The recommendation is that Council approve the submission of an application to the Municipal Energy Manager Program in collaboration with the town of Hinton. Council has been through the report before. I would highlight that energy costs are significant overhead costs for the municipality, as they are in businesses and in homes. Except in the case of the municipality, they are nearly $1 million a year in a regular year. And so efforts to identify opportunities to save those costs would have a benefit on taxpayers ultimately. And there are a number of new and emerging programs and technologies that the municipality may wish to take advantage of to reduce our energy utilization and costs and greenhouse gas emissions, in fact, as well. But administration's view is that for us to be able to take advantage of those technologies and to be able to assess them, assess their relevance and utility to the municipality, we need first to have a plan. And the Municipal Energy Program, Municipal Energy Manager Program, is intended in its first year to deliver an assessment of the current state of energy use in municipal facilities, a specific recommendation and plan for municipal facilities on how to reduce energy consumption, and identification of potential funding sources for the plan that's recommended forward. And so that logical approach seems to be the best way to attack the issue of reducing utility costs in municipal facilities. And that's why the recommendation is brought forward as it is. I know that Council has seen this before and discussed it at committee, and so I will end my introductory remarks there.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Is there a motion or otherwise? I wanted to make one point to save myself relinquishing the chair to make an appointment. If there is a councillor prepared to make the motion in line with the recommendation, I thought that we had discussed a change to the word in the last line rather than the budget envelope be approved through the 2022 budget process, that we change that word to be considered through that, because I don't think we are in a position as council sitting today to indicate that matters are approved in a budget that is to come. So with that exception, I leave that open. Councillor Butler, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I appreciate you mentioning that, because I was going to, I had actually raised that last time. So that being the case, I would like to go ahead and offer it. I'll make the motion, but I will change that word when I read it. And I think that's acceptable to everyone. And I see Mr. Given nodding. So I'll move that Council approve the submission of an application to the Municipal Energy Manager Program in collaboration with the Town of Hinton, with financial impacts outside the currently approved 2021 budget envelope to be considered through the 2022 budget processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Is there any further debate with respect to the motion? Councillor Demota and then Councillor McGrath.
I really appreciate this initiative, and because of the resources out there. I also would like to encourage any residents out there as well to explore what the federal government has in place as far as subsidies and grants for initiatives like this. And as far as the municipality is concerned, regardless if there aren't any grants out there or not, I'm hoping that this will provide some sort of trickling often into the overall operation, into finding efficiencies in other areas, whether it be phone lines or all these other things in communications. I'm hoping that will spark other initiatives. So I commend administration for going forward with this, and I look forward to its the products of its fruition. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. I'm with Councillor Demota, and I commend administration for having the foresight to see this application and have it come forward to council. I'm very hopeful that we're successful with this application and see so much value in a program like this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Anything further? Right, I will then call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you all. And might I say, Mr. Given, apart from the merits of the application, I want to extend thanks and credit to the municipality of Jasper administration working opportunity to collaborate with neighbors, which will have a benefit in and of itself apart from this particular project. So I really appreciate that you've made that overture and it's been accepted. I think that stands us in good stead moving forward. So thank you for that. That takes us to 8.3, COVID Relief Restricted Reserve. Mr. Given.
Thanks, Your Worship. Again, very brief introduction, given that Council has seen this report at Committee of the Whole. Here today, though, we are not asking so much about the details of the use of the COVID Relief Reserve. Rather, we are narrowly focused on the recommendation of essentially what to do with the 2021 surplus. The recommendation that committee saw last week was that the $396,712 be directed to the COVID Relief Reserve. And that's the question that's here in front of council. At committee, council directed administration to identify a broad suite of potential programs. We will work on that and bring it forward. Again, the subject of the item here in front of council today is essentially the utilization of that $396,000. And from committee, the recommendation was that it be applied to the COVID Relief Reserve, which would see that reserve have a total amount of $1,171,712, with the additional amount on top from the council motion of approximately, and council will remember the number, but the additional amount that was directed specifically to the COVID Relief Reserve of the daycare funds.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Discussion or motion from council? Councillor Butler.
Be happy to make the motion. I would like to just say one thing. I apologize, Mr. Given, but because this issue certainly receives plenty of public scrutiny, I believe you just said that we are dealing with $396,000 and you identified it as the 2021 surplus. I think that was just a slip of the tongue. I believe this is the 2020 surplus from 2020. And I'm sorry, I totally don't mean to be picky, but
100%
people are paying attention.
Yeah, 100% correct. Slip of the tongue, and that is correct. We have not yet ended the 2021 year. And
no,
I can only hope
be surprised to know we'd all be surprised to know we had a surplus in 2021. That being said, I'd be happy to make the motion. The council approve allocating an additional $396,712 to the COVID Relief Reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Any debates? Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. I just have, it's not really debate. I am in favor of the motion, obviously I made it. But I'm still a little confused, Mr. Given, and we didn't get perhaps a full answer because Mrs. Malinchuk wasn't at the meeting, but I know that one or two of us confused about the second and third line of the third paragraph, where it refers to incorporating $175,000 within the budget to offset foreseeable uncertainties in shelter and fitness and aquatic center. And I just don't understand the implication of that. As it's included in the RFD, I take it as something that I ought to consider when considering this motion. And I still don't really understand that because I don't remember or know when we did that or even what it means. If it doesn't really apply, I'm happy if that's the answer. I'd just like to understand the implication of that statement.
Sure. Your Worship, to Councillor Butler's question, it doesn't really apply to this recommendation today, but for additional clarity, administration wanted to ensure that Council understood the approach that we use to utilizing the most dollars. And so a portion of the most dollars were incorporated in the 2021 budget, and this was noted during budget time, in the departmental budgets. Because we already knew, going into the 2021 year, we knew that revenue in those budgets areas would not be as high as it had been in any other typical year. We could foresee that loss in advance. And so we incorporated some of the most dollars as allowed under the program in the 2021 budget directly in those program areas. So it was baked into the budget. And again, I believe we noted that specifically during the presentations. It's highlighted here because we just wanted to ensure that there's a bit more transparency around how we utilize those most dollars.
Go ahead, Councillor.
If I may, thank you. That actually does clarify it. So I think the administration is saying that $175,000 of most funding has already been incorporated into the 20 budget, and then following that, we have still this $396,000 of most funding that we can still deal with. So that does in fact clarify it completely. Well, and I read it completely differently, so thank you.
No, well, and Councillor Butler, thank you. And I have to be the stickler now on a point. To be very clear, and I tried to go to pains in the report to make this clear, we no longer have any most money available to us. All of the most dollars were expended prior to March 31st, 2021. And so what the 396 is a year-end surplus after adjustments after the audit of our 2020 year. Just to clarify that point.
Well, you're nitpicking with a nitpicker, so thank you. And I do understand that, and I really do take that point. It is not most money, it is a surplus. So that's great. It is now all very clear to me. Thank you.
Thank you both. Councillor DeBoda.
Yeah, no, I know that was asked last week and we were waiting for that to come back. So I'm glad it got addressed, and I am super clear on that now. So there was to me some ambiguity around it, but makes total sense now, and I appreciate that. And it's fully understood that money is all accounted for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further debates with respect to the motion? All right, I will call the question that Council approve allocating an additional $396,712 to the COVID Relief Reserve. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. As an aside, Mr. Given, and it was not relevant to the motion that was before Council, but in the background, there is reference to a motion arising from the May 11th Committee of the Whole meeting. And I just wonder whether, because those minutes have not yet been before us because we haven't had another Committee of the Whole meeting. and I just leave it to you or administration to confirm whether or not there were words in that motion to say that align with committee's preference for consideration of all presented options rather than a preference for the presented options. And it's simply a question that we left with administration to come back with a plan that might include everything, but we hadn't necessarily nailed anything down. So that's a discussion to come, but I just raised that question about the wording of that because it's in today's agenda, but it has yet to be in approved minutes. I leave that with you. All right, that takes us to agenda item 9, request for a letter of support regarding the Jasper Employment Services. That is an attachment to the agenda. No need for administration to necessarily reference that, but any councillor who may wish to speak to the matter. Councillor Butler.
Thanks very much, Mayor Ireland. I'm tremendously concerned about this. The loss of service to the community that I understand may result from this change at the provincial level is critical. I am very concerned about it. Procedurally, I find myself uncertain what the way forward is. I'd be happy to make a motion here now that we respond to this correspondence by drafting a letter. But procedurally, I don't know if that would be preferred or that it be referred to a future meeting. But I am really concerned to this service has been provided in Jasper for years and years. It sort of just goes on. It doesn't receive a lot of council attention because it's not within the purview of the municipal organization. But the loss of this service to the community will be impossible to calculate. I shudder to think of it. So I am happy to make a motion if that's what wish, or however you see this proceeding procedure.
Thank you. I think either is sufficient. So if you're comfortable making a motion that we accept the letter and direct a letter to the relevant provincial minister, that's fine. I'm not sure that we would gain very much by a committee of the whole discussion, but if there is a perceived need for that, that too would be a legitimate outcome of today's meeting. So I leave it to you, Councillor Butler, if you wish to make a motion.
Oh, well, thank you. I do. There's certainly been some sensitivity about notice and that sort of thing, but I'll put forward the motion that we accept this letter and direct that administration draft a letter to the relevant minister. The letter, I believe, should come from the mayor on behalf.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demota.
I'm in favor of supporting this as well. And, you know, I know that there's a mandate by the province for red tape reduction, and we're seeing some of that impact on the community coming in all sorts of forms. And, you know, this is another thing that I think that can be addressed, particularly if there's going to be like this blanket rule ruling that goes across the province. And one thing that makes a resort municipality more unique, we've already seen it. They've acknowledged that we are unique through giving us extra most money. We've seen that resort areas have been unique because of the vaccines the extra vaccines that were sent to Banff during their spike. And I think, you know, the recognition that resort areas are different. I think that having this service here is very important. Particularly because of the flux and of work that comes in and out of here, the need for positions and the filling of those positions, as well as coaching people. I think that they've provided a great service so far, and we need to continue that and help support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keller-Harretti.
I too support this motion. The Jasper Employment Centre is very important to our business community, important to all the employees here. When the season, because we're so up and down, like we have seasons where we're in summer, then we go down a little bit in fall, we're back in winter, and they provide a lot of courses, a lot of upgrading to individuals that are here, students during the time of work. And I think we would be at a huge loss if we lost the employment service.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Rempe. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much for the recognition, Mayor Ireland. I'm not sure if my background causes a concern to see my hand sometimes, but it's been up a few times without being acknowledged in today's meeting. But thank you, and to Councillor Butler and to Councillor Demota for bringing up the importance, and sorry, to Councillor Keller-Rempe as well, to bring up the importance of this letter of support to the Government of Alberta from Mayor and Council. It has been brought up at our community conversation last week, and it is certainly really important to all stakeholders, organizations, and community members that we do anything and everything to support employment services not being moved, regionalized, and staying local to the community of Jasper. We all understand the importance, and it is imperative that Council support this request to write a letter to the Government of Alberta on behalf of our entire community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath, and I apologize if I missed recognizing you on previous occasions. I will say that one of the challenges I have on my screen is that when you raise your hand directly in front of you, it is silhouetted against you, and you've got a very light background. So if you can hold your hand sort of over your shoulder, it's so much easier for me to see it. Yes, like that. So I appreciate that, and I apologize if I failed to recognize you on previous occasions. Anything further with respect to the motion? Right, and Mr. Given, just from administration's perspective, the motion was that administration would prepare a letter for signature by the mayor. You're content that you have sufficient direction? Perfect, thank you for that. I will call the question. All in favor? Are there any opposed? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. And thank you to Ms. Marcoux for sending that to our attention. Agenda item 10, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. There is nothing on the agenda. I would like to note, in case that a member of the public is watching, that we were advised that we had received a reply through our feedback line regarding the potential for pickleball at the current site of the skateboard park once things change, assuming that they do. And I'm not sure whether that would be something that in the ordinary course would come on a future agenda, but simply in the event that that member of the public is watching, I want to acknowledge that we have seen that piece of correspondence, and thank you for it. Other new business, Councillor Demota, did you want to launch into a repeat?
No, I think that we could just have that added to the agenda for next week. I'll send out a request via email just on just what that might be called. I just think that we need to maybe discuss, council needs to discuss what our intended process is for receiving recommendations from either committee or facing situations like today. And if there are gaps from when we first discussed this to administration coming back with recommendations or prepared material, that we see it a week before, at least try to make that effort. And this is one of the reasons why we had notice of motion before, because we did end up having to deal with a lot of things on the fly. And I think that we would be better prepared and better serve the greater good, the public in the community by being well informed. We don't need necessarily to be in continuity with each other, but at least have a better understanding of our approach going into making decisions. So it's just a matter of setting ourselves up for success and everybody else at the same time. So I'll forward something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Is there any other new business for council today? If not, then I'll move to agenda item 12, councillor reports. Are there reports for information for council? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Last week, I attended the Inclusion Committee meeting on Thursday, followed by the annual general meeting of the Jasper Community Teen Society on Thursday evening. I attended the community conversation in which the topic of the employment services being at risk of leaving our community was brought up. And in that light, I don't think
It appears we may have lost our deputy mayor and our mayor. Oh,
I simply stopped my camera feed, hoping that I might then get connected with Deputy Mayor McGrath, who it appears has been kicked out, but will be readmitted shortly, I hope. While we await the return of Deputy Mayor McGrath, are there any other reports? Councillor DePona.
Last Thursday, we had Culture and Rec Board where we welcomed our new member, Patrick Harvey. He's very keen and excited with moving forward with a lot of our initiatives. I have to say that a few of our board members have been taking some of these webinars in on board development, and I've, just to forward to administration, I find that some of these provided by AUMA very helpful, especially for new councillors coming in, and maybe just understanding board structures and or the financials behind that. I found that this week's was quite important. And the reason we were going through this was just for finding out what our purpose should be and understanding the structures of boards. And we're all fully aware that there may be some changes coming up with administration reviewing the current setup of our boards and committees. And we also understand that that's going to affect us. And having said that, we would like to invite Mr. Given and or Ms. Nadon to come and sit in on one of our meetings soon, maybe before or during that process to give an understanding and provide some feedback and maybe get some feedback from the expectations of what the people on the board are feeling and would like to convey going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. There is Councillor McGrath back with us. And so I would invite you, Councillor McGrath, to continue. We lost you somewhere through your report.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I had all of my devices fail all at once. So my apology, and I'm not sure where my internet failed. But catching the tail end of what Councillor Demota has just suggested, I believe that my intention of making the statement that I was trying to make was very aligned with what Councillor Demota was suggesting. When it comes to representation as a councillor on various boards and committees, I struggle with process. So I am the councillor that is responsible for bringing information that comes from the community conversations forward. And the example today of the letter from the Employment Center is a really great example of it coming forward in a formal way by an external body other than a councillor for governmental advocacy. And it is needed and it is desired at the community conversation level and at the level of the entire community. I believe that rent controls are also advocated for. But I struggle with the way in which to bring that forward. If it was, say, an organization bringing it forward, it would be streamlined as far as process, but I believe that if I was to bring it forward, it would be less effective. So I would love, within the context of the review of committees and boards, to have this streamlining of processes more clearly defined, both for the councillors that are currently serving on boards and committees to better understand our role and how we can be most effective to the members of the boards and committees, but also for administration to perhaps come up with some recommendations within the review on how this can move forward and be a little more succinct for the future council. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McGrath. Any further reports? All right, I can report. Oh, I'm sorry. I will reserve. Councillor Butler and then Councillor Keller-Rampe.
Thank you very much. Only to report that the Jasper Community Housing Corporation will be having a meeting this Friday. Primary areas of discussion will be next steps on Connaught housing, on the Connaught affordable housing project. I'm sorry for stumbling there. And in particular, in light of the fact that we did not receive the grant that we had applied for late in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Keller-Rampe.
Just to let you know that Alberta Health Services has worked with Community Futures West Yellowhead, and we got the green light to go ahead with Lemonade Day, our young entrepreneurs, on June 19th. If any members of council or administration would like to volunteer here on June 19th, please let Nancy at Community Futures or myself know. Thank you. And if we can add it to the upcoming events, that'd be great.
Thank you for that, Councillor Keller-Rampe. So I can report that since our last meeting, I've had a number of meetings. I attended briefly the Inclusion Committee meeting referenced by Deputy Mayor McGrath. I've attended a museum meeting last week, another West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Board meeting. And on May 12th, I had a regional mayor's webinar via Zoom that is now posted to our website, I believe, for anybody that was interested. A couple of things are arising from that. The key, of course, is collaboration at a regional level, and I think great steps were made in that regard. Nothing specific, but the recognition of a regional approach to a number of issues that affect our communities. Through all of that, a challenge was issued, and that is a challenge for each community, so that it's Edson, Hinton, Yellowhead County, and Jasper, to get the most of our population, that is the highest percentage vaccinated. The deadline, I think, is the 15th of July will be the counting date. And I assured all that Jasper was going to crush it because we have such an engaged community and we've done such a spectacular job already of dealing with the COVID crisis, and we have people on board. So I am quite confident that Jasper can easily have the highest percentage of people vaccinated, assuming, of course, that we get the requisite number of vaccines, but that shouldn't be in doubt. So I encourage all of you to help me persuade everybody to get out as soon as they can to get vaccinated. It will make a tremendous difference to our economy as we move forward. It'll make a tremendous difference to the health of our community as well. And our numbers are low, they should stay that way, but vaccines are a critical role. So I encourage you all to promote vaccines to everyone that you meet all the time. And the result will be that the winning mayor will provide swag to those other mayors who will then have to wear our swag in their community for a period of time. So we will win in every respect. Finally, I can report that last week I had an opportunity to meet with Cam Spence from Travel Alberta and Dave Rodney, who has been appointed as the CAO of Invest Alberta under the ministry headed by the Honorable Mr. Schweitzer, which includes tourism. So he was here specifically to look at Jasper's needs with respect to investment in tourism product as we move forward and move into recovery from COVID, but beyond that as well. So it was an interesting session with Mr. Rodney. Mr. Given and I had an opportunity a few months ago to meet with him with respect to similar issues. So it's an ongoing engagement, but we have Travel Alberta and Invest Alberta both interested in what they can do to assist our community to recover. So a very useful meeting. And that is it for my report. Is there anything else? All right, if not, upcoming events, the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce General Meeting, 1 p.m. on June 3rd. Councillor Keller-Hrampe has added to that the Lemonade Day that's coming up. And that appears to be it, unless anybody has another upcoming event to bring to the attention of council. If not, we have an in-camera session scheduled to deal with CAO performance feedback. I will need a motion to go in camera for that. Councillor Demota.
Before we do that, I'd first like to move that this council meeting go beyond 4 hours, because if we go into that and it takes longer, then I'd rather have that dealt with instead of going in and out to come back. So I move for that now.
Well, on the basis that that doesn't commit us to go beyond 4 hours, I might be in favor. Any debate on that? A motion that we can, in fact, continue beyond 4 hours. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And a motion then to move in camera. Councillor Keller-Hrampe. Motion to move in camera.
If I could do so.
I'm sorry.
Well, I would just like to ask Mr. Given if he can to forward a link for that in-camera session, and then just to partake in the beginning, to partake in the discussion.
Yeah,
as
I
well,
think
if
you'll
that's
see,
not putting too much.
Councillor Demota, you'll see an invite in your inbox already.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, and before I call the question, I'm going to propose that we perhaps take a recess. Will 20 minutes be enough? Could we reconvene at 1 o'clock for the in-camera session? All right, I see primarily nods and thumbs up. So I will call the question that we move in camera now at 12:42. All in favor? There are none opposed. That motion is carried. We will move in to an in-camera session. We'll reconvene at 1 o'clock, and I can advise any members of the public who are watching that there will be no items that return to public discussion following that in-camera session. So I thank everyone for their attendance this morning and wish them a good afternoon, and we'll see them again at a subsequent meeting, but there won't be any to tune back in later today. Thank you all, and enjoy a bit of quick nourishment, and see you in 18 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Have a good day.